We are today's portion is Naso, which is the second Torah portion in the book of Numbers. So we're in the book of Numbers now. The book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Hebrew Bible. The fourth book of the Hebrew Bible is a book about disappointment. It's a book about conflict. It's a book about the gap between the ideal and the real. It's a book about the gap between expectations and fulfillment. It's a book about frustration. It's a good summer book. It's a good summer book. If you've ever been stuck on the 405 on one of those impossibly hot summer afternoons, and the traffic is moving at 2 miles an hour, and the smoke is choking you, and the people are just, and the radio is just recording lunacy, and you just have this sense of a world out of control. Mazel tov, you're in the book of Numbers. The book of Numbers, in Hebrew, it's called Bamidbar, which is a much better name. Numbers is just because the first chapters have a census of the Israelites about to leave Mount Sinai and continue the journey. The Hebrew Bamidbar is much better because this is a book about the wilderness. It's a book about the social or the psychological wilderness that Israelites face as they begin the journey toward a promised land. It's a book that it's a book about the wilderness that any idealist faces. When that idealist tries to apply their ideals and their ethics and their vision of the world, their aspirations to the real human material of the world. When you sit in a college classroom, it's fun to be an idealist because it's all theoretical. When you sit in your study with a warm cup of Earl Grey tea and you imagine the way the world can be, it's all possible because it's all theoretical. It's when you exit those pristine environments and you enter the real world of real people who have real motivations and real fears and real jealousies and real needs and real desires. And you have to somehow reconcile your social ideals with the real human material of the world. That's when you get the book of Bamidbar. That's what the book of Bamidbar is all about. It's about that confrontation. Big aspirations, beautiful visions, marvelous ideas about how the world ought to be. Small people. You know, because if the world were filled with generous, kind, saintly, giving people, then all moral aspirations would come true. But all you need to do is try and get on the Ventura Freeway on a crowded afternoon to know who really lives in the world, right? That son of a gun who won't let you on, right? Who's guarding his place, you know, and won't let you in. You know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, that's what you realize. I told you that Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the great French philosopher, was one of the great idealists in Western culture, Western civilization, had this ideal about how people can change and be free. And that's for one small reason, because Jean-Jacques Rousseau was never a counselor in a Jewish summer camp. And I was for many summers. And I've told you this, and I wanted to go on record because it's about this time of year, that the most dangerous, vicious, violent, vile, despicable creature who walks the earth is not the great blue shark of the Pacific, nor the man-eating anaconda of the Brazilian Amazon, no, nor the great northern grizzly bear, nor the Bengal tiger, no, they're tame compared to a bunk of 11-year-old girls. You have a cabin of 11-year-old girls, and they walk in on day one, and they randomly pick one of their own, and then they slowly pick her to death over the course of a summer. For no reason than just, let's see what happens when we make Stephanie cry. Over and over again. And that's, and that's just the reality. I mean, you gotta, I don't know how many of you were summer camp counselors, but it's the greatest laboratory of human change and evolution you've ever seen. And that's what you're dealing with. What the Bible wants us to understand is that, yes, you should have ideals, brilliant ideals, powerful ideals, ideals that inspire and motivate. but you also have to have a very deep grasp on the realism of the human condition. Because you have to understand the material out of which your social ideals are going to be made. Because if you don't, what you end up with is something far more dangerous. What you end up with is the disillusionment of the disillusioned idealist. And let me tell you something, there ain't nothing worse than a disillusioned idealist. Because the disillusioned idealist, at best, the disillusioned idealist sort of crawls away and becomes a privatist. He just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. He'll just take care of his own, right? The guys I went to school with still live in the Santa Cruz Mountains, right? They brew their own beer. They live in the mountains. They grow their own dope. They brew their own beer. They have nothing to do with the world. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that disillusioned idealists become tyrants. Because if they gain power, they try to impose their moral aspirations on an unwilling population, and it's like squeezing the square peg into the round hole. And they pound on it and are willing to sacrifice everyone who's not ready to go along with their ideal. And that's a very dangerous circumstance. That's a very dangerous circumstance. And that's what the book of Bamidbar is really all about. So far, so good? Pop, you want to say something? You sure? Okay. All right. Is it time to fix the air conditioning? Yes. All right, let us all pray, shall we? Oh, Lord, who gave us carrier control systems for... All right, here we go. Oh, I see how to do this. No, that's a woozy thing to do. Let's see what happens. We'll see what happens. If it should be on. I don't know why it's not on. It's not on. That's the funny thing. Cool, occupied, override. There it goes. Now it will be frigid in a few minutes. Watch. Okay, now, if we're going to understand this, before we get to the book of Bamidbar, let's go back and take a quick look, a look at the whole history of sin. So today we're going to spend time with some sin, okay? I think it's a good thing. To fight sin, you have to know sin, right? So let's get our hands dirty with some sin. Now, let's begin with a simple definition. When a Christian says the word sin and a Jew say the word sin, they mean two different things. And that sometimes blurs the conversation. So let's understand that first, because we live in a Christian context, and sometimes this word gets misunderstood. When a Jew says the word sin, they mean an act, an event, an act, something you did. And that act was contrary to the will of God, and that act pollutes the world and the self. But because it's a discrete act, it can be undone. The Jewish belief in tshuva is one of the most profound principles of Jewish theology. The idea that no matter what you did, you can undo it. You can confess it, you can express remorse, you can try to apologize, you can do repair, and you can try to not repeat the sin. This idea that tshuva is always available is based on the idea that sin is a choice, it is a discrete individual act, and that free choice is given the human being at every moment to determine the shape of character. There are constituent constitutional elements of character. Some of us are just nicer than other people. Some of us have short tempers, and some of us are patient. Some of us are generous, and some of us are less than generous. But basically, our behaviors are discrete choices. Our behaviors are discrete choices that can be made at any time. If you are the kind of person who tends to fly off the handle at every provocation, you can practice patience. And patience will eventually become your way, because character, said Maimonides, is habit. It's habitual. Practice patience once, practice patience twice, practice patience 3 times, pretty soon you're Mother Teresa. That's how it works. Look, the simple symbol, I told you this last time. This is one scientific fact of which I'm very sure. there have been dogs on this planet for 100 million years. Not once did a dog ever wake up in the morning and say meow. Not once. Not once did a dog ever wake up in the morning and say, who am I today? Dogs are, you can teach an old dog new tricks. It's true, you can. But you can't teach a dog to be anything but a dog. Because the doggy was born with dogginess. His personality or her personality, her character, her way of being, her dogginess was programmed into that doggy by nature long before you got it. The worst possible, you're going to hate me for this, but it's good, important to say it. The worst possible case in point was two great musicians named Siegfried and Roy, who raised white Siberian tigers from infancy and trained them and made them part of the family and ate with them and slept with them and God knows what else they did with them. And then one day, one of those tigers just looked at Roy and said, you look a lot like lunch. And because you can train a tiger to jump through hoops, and you can train him to get in the box and out of the box, and you can train him to roar and stand up on two legs, but you can't train him not to be a tiger. And the tiger is programmed that when it's lunchtime, it's lunchtime. And if Roy looked like lunch, Roy looked like lunch. Now, you and me, on the other hand, we are the only creature in all of nature that isn't bound by that rule. Because while there are a set of human instincts, fundamentally your moral character is not pre-programmed, it's chosen. You and I wake up in the morning and decide, who am I going to be today? Am I going to be generous? Am I going to be stingy? Am I going to be patient? Am I going to be angry? Am I going to be forgiving? Am I going to be giving? What am I today? Who am I today? We are the only unformed creature in all of nature. So that you can't really speak about a human nature. You can speak about the human condition, but you can't speak about human nature because human nature is fundamentally a pattern of choices that people make. That fundamental idea leads to the Jewish idea that, and therefore, you are responsible for the character that you are, because you are the accumulation of your choices. And if you're not happy with that pattern of character, then you can change that. You know, it's getting cold, I'm sorry. Right? You can always change your pattern of character. That's the fundamental Jewish idea of tshuva. So far, so good? Yeah. Okay. What does a Christian mean when they say sin? Christian means a condition. It's not an act. It's a condition of the human being. In Christian theology, the human being and God are impossibly separated. And what separates us, the gap between human being, the nature of human being, and the nature of God, is what's called sin. God is perfect, God is whole, God is good, and human beings are, well, not. You can feel this viscerally if you've ever been in a great European cathedral. You ever been to a great European cathedral? Not your local Episcopal church. Those are American. You got to go to a European. The only one in America that I know that's close to it is St. John the Divine on 111th Street in Manhattan. Otherwise, you got to go to St. Paul's in Rome, right? You know what I'm talking. You got to go to Notre Dame in Paris. You walk in. What does it look like? How does it feel? Right, it's 400 feet straight up, and you feel on the floor like a worm. That's what you are. That's Christian theology. Remember, most Christians in the Middle Ages were not literate. So these theological ideas could not be expressed in books. They had to be expressed in architecture. So what's the architecture say? God is great. You are puny. You are morally insignificant. You are a bug on the floor. It's St. Paul's in St. Peter's in St. Paul's is in Rome. St. Peter's in Rome. St. Paul's is in London. St. Peter's in Rome. They have these giant saint statues all over the place. They're like 11 feet high. Because the saints, and they're a level above you, right? Because the saints, they're at least morally significant. You, what do you know? And intervening between this impossibly high God and the puniness of you on the floor is the person of Christ. Think of the cross as a diagram of the connection between heaven and earth, right? The cross is that way in which God reaches across the impossible gap of sin in order to rescue the human being and bring the human being into relationship with God. That's Christian theology. Okay? So when a Christian says sin, or in Texas when I lived there, it was a 4-syllable word, right? Sin. When a Christian says sin, he's talking about the condition by which you are inevitably going to disappoint God, because by nature you are broken, you are corrupt, you are polluted, and you couldn't possibly be righteous even if you tried. No Jew ever believed that. So in a very strange sense, because the Christian therefore says, because you're so broken, you need Christ's intervention in order to come to God. Only through me can you come to the Father. So Franz Rosenzweig, the great German Jewish philosopher, who at one point was toying with the idea of converting to Christianity, but gave it up, and ironically on Yom Kippur, because he said, in the end, I understand that every Jew is his own Jesus Christ. Translation: every Jew possesses within him or herself the capacity to heal the breach, to heal the gap between me and God. I don't need Christ to do that. I can do that myself. That's the nature of Yom Kippur. So in a very real way, you either get Yom Kippur or Easter. You can't have both. Yom Kippur says, I come to God, I cleanse myself and return to God, and God accepts me back. Easter says, Christ comes into the world, dies on the cross, and that's what returns me to God. Those two holidays are opposite each other. Is that somewhat clear? So now we're going to open the Hebrew Bible. Let's take a look at how the Hebrew Bible deals with sin. All right? Sin number 1. Turn to page 14 in your Chumash. Everybody good so far? That was a long, long introduction. 14. 14. 40. Arbasa. We don't have Chumashim? Oh, Jesus. Yeah, go find any maintenance person and tell them we need 25 of these. Marsha, come, I'll read it. He'll go get a few. Just find one of the maintenance people, tell them we need 25 of these. We've only been doing this for 3 years. You'd think maybe chas v'shalom. I want to believe that there is such a demand for Bible in this building. That's why they're never here. I want to believe that there's so many people in this building elsewhere learning Torah. Are they coming? Go inside, find anyone who looks like a maintenance person, and ask them for 25 chumashim. I want to believe that elsewhere in this building, people are so thirsty for the Word of God that they've taken all the chumashim out of the chapel. Amen. There you go. All right, let's go. I'll read it out loud. Yeah? I'm telling you. That's who I am. I always think positive. The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it and tend it. And the Lord God commanded the man, of every tree of the garden you're free to eat, but as for the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat of it, for as soon as you eat of it, you'll die. Here's my garden. Pretty trees, tasty trees, nice trees. You can have all of them. Don't touch my magic tree. Don't touch my magic tree. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Here comes Chumash. Page 14, 15, right? Don't touch my magic tree. If you touch it, thank you so much. Bad things are going to happen, right? Now turn the page. Okay, now we get a little permutation, right? God said it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a fitting helper. So the Lord God formed the animals. That didn't work. And finally, he formed woman. Look at page 17. The two of them were naked, the man and his wife, and felt no shame. Now the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild beasts. He said to the woman, did God really say you shouldn't eat of any tree of the garden? It's a curious question. And the woman said, no, we can eat of all the trees of the garden. It's only the fruit in the middle that we can't eat. Can't even touch the damn thing. Serpent said, you're not going to die. God knows as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be open. You'll be like divine beings who know good and bad. And here's the verse. It's page 19, verse 6. When the woman saw that the tree was good for eating. Thank you, Dad. You got it? John, you got it? You okay? Are you feeling strong? All right, now lift it over your head 10 times. He works for Kaiser. They're into this wellness thing. So. Thank you. That's enough. That's good. When the woman saw that the tree was good for eating. How do you see that a tree is good for eating? I don't know, but how does something look yummy? That's the question. If you've never eaten it, how would you know it looks yummy?
Well, if it has fruit.
Yeah, but how do you know the fruit is edible? I mean, does a pineapple look good for eating? See? Okay? All right, I'm just, listen, I go to the market. David, it's fine, it's enough. It's fine, that's enough, thank you. And the tree was a delight to the eyes. This was a pretty tree. And a source of wisdom. How would you know that? Anyway, she took of its fruit and she ate. She gave some to her husband and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. They perceived they were naked. And they sewed together fig leaves and made loincloths. They heard the sound of the Lord God moving about in the garden in the breezy time of the day. And the man and his wife hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. John, that's fine. Just go. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's enough. Look at verse 9. This is where the confrontation begins. This is so interesting. The Lord God called out to the man and said, "Where are you?" First question asked in the Bible. Where are you? And he replied, "I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he asked, "Who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the tree from which I had forbidden you to eat?" So first of all, notice how many questions are packed into that conversation, right? It's all questions. First, God says, "Where are you?" And he says, "I was naked and I was hiding." And God asks him, how many more questions? 2 more questions, right? 3 questions altogether. Where are you? Who told you you were naked? Did you eat of my tree? Did you eat of my tree? Why questions instead of statements? Why not say to him, "I know what you did. You got busted. You ate of my..." Why questions? What's the function? Anyone here have little kids? Anyone here ever raised little kids? And your kid does something wrong, and you say to the kid, "Did you hit your brother?" You know, the kid's like lying there, you know, "Did you hit your little brother?" All mothers do this, by the way. My mother certainly did it, right? Why do you ask the child the question? You what? Yeah, there's a certain sense of, you know, I want to, guilt, is that why? Yeah, I want to see if you'll acknowledge what you did, you know? And also because I think there's another level of this. I think at this stuff, look how early this is in the Torah. God creates this creature, and he's not sure what this creature is all about, right? I mean, first of all, no other animal does this. I don't know if you knew this, but animals eat what they're taught to eat, okay? Sharks don't eat tofu. You could float all the tofu you want in the Pacific Ocean. No shark is going to go and eat it. Is that true? This from a man with 2 children at Berkeley, that's what. I mean, creatures eat what they're instinctually trained to eat, and they don't eat stuff they're not allowed to eat. You don't have to, I mean, you know, they're going to, and if they're going to eat it, they're going to eat it, you know. Ask Siegfried and Roy. I mean, you don't, so he has this one creature, and he said, "Don't eat that fruit," and then the creature runs off and eats the fruit. Like, what? Part of this isn't just taking responsibility. Part of this is a process of mutual discovery. Who are you? Who are you? Testing. Who are you? What kind of creature are you? You can be obedient. You can be disobedient. You can assert your own desires over mine. Right? You can, by the way. For example, if you have a moral objection to the law of gravity, so you climb to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge, you declare your moral objection to gravity, and you jump. And for the next few seconds, you can show God who's boss, right? And then gravity has a nasty way of catching up with you quick, right? I mean, you understand, you can disobey. And he's never met a creature that can disobey. Really? You can disobey? And why did you disobey? I gave you all of this. This is a classic mommy's question, mom and dad's question, right? We gave you everything. Why did you act like this, right? Right? What did you lack? This is a classic kind of question. Why are you disobeying? Why? What's the nature of I think there really is a curiosity here. Part of it is exactly that, taking responsibility. But part of it is also a sort of curiosity about what kind of creature are you? Marcia, go ahead.
Isn't that also a way of telling somebody that what they're doing is wrong?
Well, you wouldn't ask the question if he didn't already know it was wrong. You see, the presumption is you already know that you're not supposed to hit your little brother, right?
No, but you're teaching them it's wrong.
Well, but he knew he's not supposed to hit. I knew I wasn't supposed to slug my brother. So when my mother said, "Did you slug your brother?" it wasn't like, "Didn't you know it was the wrong thing to do?" Right? Bernie Madoff knew that he was stealing. He just did it anyway. That's the interesting part of human beings, that we can compartmentalize or divide the self, right? You can divide the self. Now, you can rationalize it. Lots of us are good at rationalizing things, right? And how you rationalize, but the whole act of rationalization is already an admission that I know that what I did was wrong because I needed to come up with an explanation for it. You see?
But some people deny it.
What?
Deny it.
Well, if you're really denying it, then either there is some moral ambiguity, right? Okay, or there's a quality of, there is a character called a sociopath who really doesn't either acknowledge that he did it or acknowledge that it's wrong. There is such a character in the world, but that's not as usual. I mean, the usual case is I know I did it and I did it anyway. And either I did it anyway as an act of rebellion or I did it anyway as an act of desire. The Jewish tradition has 3 different words for sin, by the way. Right? The first word for sin is a chet. Chet comes from the world of archery. I was aiming at a target and I missed. Okay? Aiming at a target and I missed. Okay? I'm on a diet, but I had the piece of strawberry shortcake, and I don't know, I just missed. I just sort of lost it, right? It's an innocent mistake, as it were. Or, mistake. And the second word is pesha, in which I know that what I was doing was the wrong thing. That's a crime. I was doing, but I had reason. I wanted my own reasons to do it. Madoff was protecting whatever, his own image or his own wealth or whatever. The robber who's increasing his wealth through robbery. Okay, and the last one is avera, which is considered a rebellion against heaven. I'm doing this dafka because I want to do something wrong. I want to show God that He's not in charge. I'm in charge. Okay, and those are the levels of kinds of wrongness that go along with this. You see? Okay? Yeah, Bill.
So why does the high holiday liturgy use the less critical level?
It uses all of them. It uses all of them. If you look at all,
Hate is a big deal.
chet is a big one because most of the things we do in the year are chet, right? You should have remembered your wife's birthday. You forgot your wife's birthday. It's not because you don't love your wife. Of course you love your wife. You were busy doing other things. You forgot your wife's birthday, right? And you'll spend the whole year repenting it, And you'll say it was a mistake, and besides, who can ever repay you for the beautiful things you've done for me and given to me, and besides, I'll take you out to dinner the next night, and besides, that's a chet, right? And pesha is the higher level. That's when you really were doing it because you had some gain from it. And avera is an actual rebellion. Okay, Bill.
The fact that the serpent was already considered the shrewdest animal,
Yeah.
does that beg the question that the serpent had already eaten of the tree of life?
No.
It was okay for the animals to eat it, but not man?
No, I just think the serpent is that. Look, the story needs that character to move it forward, right? And frankly, I think the serpent represents that part of every one of us, which is the who's going to give me rules part of me. Who's going to tell me what to do? It's what they call down in Texas when I lived there, temptation, right? What's that voice in your head when you're trying to diet and there's a quart of chocolate chip ice cream in the back of the freezer and it finds you and it calls to you, right? Right? You're walking on the street trying to be a righteous man with your wife, and some lovely young woman in shorts comes by. Temptation. You look, but it's that part of us. It's that part of us which is not going to be bound by the rules. The question is, does that rule you, or do you rule it? That's what we go.
Was God testing himself?
Well, that's a great,
Do not touch this tree.
Test
Was
it.
he not sure of his creation?
See, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful construction of this story. I just think that I think it's a beautiful construction of the story. I always think of this story as much more innocent. It's not, testing already is a very sophisticated moral move. I think this is a very simple story about God learning human capacity. All right, while you're looking at this, turn to page 24. Go ahead, David.
Regarding the line, she also gave some to her husband.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, if you want to read the denouement of the story, by the way, is after God asks the man all of those questions. This is your answer to the question, right? Right? What does man say? Well, we all know what man said. Man stands up and says, "You're damn right I ate from your tree. It's my world and I'll eat from any damn tree I want to eat from." Right? That's the Clint Eastwood as Adam role. Right? That would be that one, right? Or you could construct it differently. You can construct maybe the Danny DeVito as Adam role, which is, "Who are you to tell me what to do? Buzz off!" That's the Danny DeVito role. But what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is the birth of a very important character, man as wuss. Because when God says, "Did you eat of my magic tree?" man says, what? "The woman you put by my side, she gave it to me and I ate." Come on. First of all, the guy who wrote that line and put it in the Torah, I'm sure there was an argument that you can't put that in the Torah, That's what happens in my house, This is, every married man in the world knows that argument, right? Right? You made me turn left. This is I don't know how many of you have had that argument. Thank God for GPS. It saved my marriage, But, right? What? Well, man, it says man. It says it's woman and man. Right. It's Vayomer. No, it's above that, right? El Ha'adam. Let me go back to it. I'll find you the phrase. No, I see what you're asking about. Verse 6, right? V'tereisha kitova etz lemachal, v'kitavel la'inayim, v'nechmara etz lehaskil, v'tikach mipiryo v'tochal, v'titen gam le'isha, her man. Isha. With mapik, which means her man. She gave to her man. Right? Now, by the way, what's supposed to happen as soon as you eat of that fruit? It's supposed to be poisonous. You're supposed to drop dead. They don't die. But something does die. Their solidarity with each other dies. Because he doesn't trust her anymore, and she won't trust him. And their solidarity with God dies. And their solidarity with nature dies. And their purity dies. And their lack of self-consciousness dies. This is the birth of what we call the human condition. Right? This is the birth of the human condition.
So did he know he was eating from that tree when she
See, that's a wonderful question. I think so, but you can construct it either way. The great thing about this literature is you can construct it in many ways. How about this? She hands him the fruit and there's a big bite mark, right? He has a choice. And he knows his choice. If he eats, then he dies with her. If he doesn't eat, if he turns to her and says, "No, we can't eat this. It's yours," she dies, and he goes back to being lonely again. So he has a choice between loneliness and death. He can choose to alienate himself from his God, but be one with his wife, or alienate himself from his wife and be one with his God. What do you choose? Put your arm around your wife when I say this. That was such a beautiful cue, and you missed it completely. You're such a romantic, Rogers. Come on. I'm giving you this beautiful cue to put your arm around your wife and say, honey. Give him the fruit. Let's see what he does. Give him the fruit. Let's see what happens. Turn to page 24. Here's sin number 2. The man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I've gained a male child with the help of God. And then she bore his brother Abel. And Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of soil. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil, and Abel, for his part, brought the choicest of the firstlings of the flock. The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. Cain was distressed, and his face fell. He was depressed. And God says, why are you distressed? Why is your face falling? Why does he keep asking questions? You notice this pattern with questions? Right? He knows why he's distressed. If you do right, there's uplift, but if you don't, sin crouches at the door. This is God's warning. Be careful. There are forces in you don't understand. And then verse 8 on page 26, please. Cain said to his brother, ... So there's an ellipse in the text, a gap. We don't know what they were talking about. You can fill that in with midrash, which is what's done. And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. The first homicide. The first 2 brothers in the world, and one kills the other. That's a hell of a picture of the world, isn't it?
He wasn't told not to hit him.
That's true. The Lord said to Cain, where's your brother Abel? Again, questions. You notice this pattern? The sin elicits not a rage from God, at least at first. The sin elicits a question. And the question either is, as you said before, an effort to see if man is prepared to take responsibility for his acts, if man understands the import of his acts. I think as well, it's what you said before over here, it's God figuring man out. Where's your brother Abel? I mean, what God wants, did you really kill him? Are you really, is that really in you? Is murder really part of the repertoire of human behavior? Again, I want to go back to animals for a second. No grizzly bear will eat you out of spite. Grizzly bear will eat you for supper. Grizzly bears don't kill for spite. Sharks don't kill for spite. Tigers, anacondas don't kill. They'll kill you for one reason. They're hungry or they're afraid. That's it. If you spook them, they'll get angry at you. But a tiger doesn't eat you because he doesn't like Democrats. Right? A tiger doesn't eat you because you cut him off in traffic. A tiger doesn't eat you because you looked at his wife wrong. A tiger eats you because he's hungry and you're tasty. Right? Only human beings kill for these reasons. In some ways, animals are in certain ways more civilized than we are because they're more predictable than we are. And God says, you what? You killed your brother? Why? Because you were jealous? Jealous? You see the Bible trying to figure this out. Please. Wait 1 second. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you mentioned that animal, either because, you're preying or out of spite, but, out of fear.
Yeah.
But you could say that spite is a form of fear.
Is it really?
You could say that.
Not in my family. Spite is spite in my family. It's like,
Well, maybe it's spite you think you're afraid, this person has it out for me.
no, that's fear. That's legitimate. If I'm really afraid of somebody, there's someone lurking in my front yard and I shoot at him, right? That's one thing. But that's not good Jewish familial spite. Come on, come to my Seder next year. You'll see. I'll show you. I'll show you what spite. I mean, my God. I mean, you remember, and Sarah and Sonia. My bubby had 5 sisters. There were 5 sisters, right? And 1 sister-in-law. And for some reason, they hated each other. And my mother, who's from the other side of the family, my mother would invite them all to the Seder and then, of course, sit them all together. Right? And Mom would take, special joy in watching them glare at each other. And I was a little boy, didn't know. I'd go to my Bubby and say, Bubby, why are you and Aunt Rosie so angry at each other? And she'd look at me and she'd say, never mention that woman's name in my presence. Which is her way of saying, I forgot. like 30 years ago, something was borrowed and not returned, or a word was said. Remember Avalon, Barry Levinson's movie? You cut the turkey. Remember that? Right. And you know, but so you're like, and Sarah, why are you mad at Aunt Sonia? Oh, that woman! That's her way of saying, I don't know. I just, you know, this is what happened. You know what I'm talking about? If you don't, come to my Seder, young Tavai. It lives in my, it's such an energy, and people are energized by it. It's like a whole energy, Arnie, yeah.
You're asking questions.
Yes.
Like God.
Yes. Like God, right. I'm trying to figure this out. When I was a little kid, I was trying to figure it out. It's all about this question. Yes, Bobby.
You know, well, I have trouble with God's approach in that it seems to me that, I'm Jewish. What do you
Yeah. So did Moses, so we're good. We're even.
It seems kind of simplistic, and it's kind of like you want to say to him, oh, please, you're being so naive. Why are you acting like
Okay, yeah, that's a wonderful.
deliberately naive? And I just,
All right, I want you to hold that thought for a minute, because when we come back to Bamidbar, which is at the end of the lecture, we're gonna come back to. No, we're gonna come back, because that question of how naive is God. But let's turn it upside down for just a minute, okay? Instead of accusing God of being naive, if you understand Bible as myth, which is the way that I like to read it, what part of us is represented by that God character? Isn't there a part of us which witnesses evil in the world and responds with a certain degree of naivete? Don't you say to yourself, you know, I was watching the HBO movie the other day, and you say, how could Bernie Madoff do this? Even in the movie, they ask him, how could you take money from Elie Wiesel? You know, and so there's sort of, doesn't evil do that to you sometimes? Doesn't evil put you in that place of complete naivete? You know, and you say, why? Why is it, why would you do that? What part of human being motivates people to do such destructive? You know what I mean? So I think I think what it really, and I appreciate the question, it's a wonderful question, but I think it represents something in us. It's a response to evil in the world, because it's sometimes really hard to imagine why people do some of the really awful, terrible, awful, terrible, destructive things.
don't we look to God to know better?
Well, yes and no.
Looking to God, it's like,
Yeah, but in a certain way, the God character of the Bible represents that part of us, which is trying to come to terms with this, trying to put it into a rational, I want to understand it. You know, I want to understand the repertoire of human responses. Right? Please, Peter.
The murder of Cain by Abel by Cain. Which one of the three categories of sin does that fall?
So you tell me. You tell me what's going on, right? I think it's a wonderful question, by the way. Is it a chet, pesha, and avera? A chet would mean he didn't mean to kill him. He just sort of.
That would be manslaughter.
Yeah, or accident, you know, negligent, whatever they call it, you know. And then pesha is a crime for some purpose of gain, and avera is a rebellion against heaven. So you tell me which it is, right?
It all depends on why he did it.
And by the way, let's go back to Bobby's question just for a second. Extraordinary human goodness motivates the exact same question. Rabbi Schulweis, you know, collected Christian rescuers in the Holocaust, and sometimes he brought them here. Unfortunately, there's not many of them alive anymore. And when you'd meet these people, you'd say the same thing. I remember we had this gentleman who was a Danish policeman. And during the war, he was a young, now he lived in Orange County, but when he was a young man, he was a policeman in Copenhagen. And he was part of the crew of young Danes whose job it was at night to go take Jewish families out of hiding, bring them to the harbor, pay the fishermen to take them across to Sweden. And you know, now the gentleman was in his 70s. This is what happened when he was in his 20s. And we asked him the same question. Why? I mean, because had he been caught, the Gestapo would have murdered him and his family. And he looked at us with the same naivete and say, because it was the right thing to do. These were our neighbors, our friends. So you have the same three categories, by the way, for mitzvah. You know, do you do a mitzvah because it's simply an act of goodness, a simple act of goodness? Do you do a mitzvah because it's an act of obedience to God, to a vision of the world? Yeah, please.
Rabbi, wasn't God the source of this jealousy between the
Well, that's a great question, because if you go back to my favorite line here, if you come back with me, on page 25, is God the source of the jealousy, right? Cain brought an offering to the Lord from the fruit of the soil. Abel brought an offering. Whose idea was it first, by the way? Cain's, right. Cain invents religion. That tells you something, right? The Lord paid heed to Abel and his offering, but to Cain and his offering he paid no heed. That's a chiastic sentence, right? Beautiful sentence. Now, so if you could say, what do you mean he paid no? Why would he choose one and not the other? So that's the first way to think about it. Now you can think about it opposite for just a second. You want to think about it opposite for a second? Cain takes a bunch of fruits and vegetables, throws it on an altar, builds a fire. What happens? The vegetables and fruits burn up. What happens? You get a lot of, where does it go? Up. Abel takes a sheep, slaughters the sheep, puts it on the fire, builds a big fire. The sheep burns up. What happens? You get a lot of smoke. Where does it go? Up. How would you know that God accepted one offering and not the other? Smell. Well, that's true, but how would you know otherwise? I mean, both. You have smoke coming up. I mean, you have smoke. There is no empirical way to tell that God accepts or doesn't accept your offering. So maybe that line is not a line describing what happened. It's describing the way that Cain saw it happening. Has there ever been a brother in history who didn't think that his other brother got the bigger piece of cake? If you've met that brother, I want to meet him, because I know every brother I know, including my three, it was, his piece of cake is bigger than mine. No, it's exactly the same piece, right? Or then you switch them. You know, okay, fine, you take his piece, he'll take it. No, there's more frosting, you know. Every brother, being a brother means being jealous of your brother because he has more than you, right? The Smothers Brothers made a career about this, right? But that's what being a brother is all about. So in a certain sense, you could say that this is his own subjective. This was his own subjective way of looking at the world. It was his own subjectivity. I want to jump ahead. I know you want to talk.
Didn't you eat the meat from the...
Yeah, you could also eat. Don't you have roasted vegetables? Asparagus, Brussels sprouts, peppers. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, as a matter of fact, yeah. Look at page 26, right? So the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain said, and here's this, I don't know, am I my brother's keeper? And keeper, by the way, the word is shomer. What does shomer mean? Guard, protector, guardian. Am I responsible for my brother? See, am I my brother's keeper is Tisdale's famous translation of the line in the King James Bible, and it's become part of American literature. But you forget what the words really mean. Hashomer achi anochi. Am I responsible for my brother? Right? So there's this dueling questions here. It's interesting. God always responds to these sins with these questions. Dueling questions, right? And then he says, "What have you done?" And now he accuses him. "The blood of your brother cries out to me from the ground." What have you done? So there's this figuring out what's the capacity of human beings. I want to jump way ahead now for a minute. We're going to skip the Noah story, which is a world corrupted. Turn to page 418. We're going to jump way ahead. So we go to Egypt. We come out of Egypt. We cross the Red Sea. Come on, Ellie, come on. Got room. Come on. There's a chair right over here if you'd like. Please, nice to see you. We cross the Red Sea, and we get to the other side of the Red Sea, and we start the journey toward the Promised Land. Right? This is after the Red Sea splitting, right? And Sea of Reeds, right? Right, and the people kvetch. They don't like the water, so he gives them water, and they don't like. There's no food, so he gives them manna. And they don't want just manna, so he gives them quail. And he gives them some instructions, right? And the instructions are, gather it, look at page 417, I'm sorry. Gather it in the morning as much as you need. In the sun it would melt. Verse 22, on the 6th day they gathered double the amount of food, 2 omers for each. And when the chieftains of the community came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Shabbat of the Lord. Bake what you would bake and boil what you would boil, and all that is left put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning as Moses ordered, and it did not turn foul. There are no maggots. So normally, if you kept manna overnight, it would rot, but not on Friday night. On Friday night, it would last. This is magic food, magic food. Then Moses said to the people, "Eat it today, for today is Shabbat." That's why you have 2 challahs on the table, right? Because if you're a working person and you're living hand to mouth, to have 2 loaves of bread on your table is a great luxury because it means tomorrow I won't starve. It's the freedom of knowing tomorrow I won't starve. And if I have 2 loaves of bread on my table and I know that tomorrow I won't starve, that means tonight and tomorrow I can stop being an economic man and I can go back to being spiritual man. I don't have to struggle for a living. I'm not going to starve. I have enough. If you only have a loaf of bread on the table and you know you're going to finish it tonight, you're worried as you go to sleep, will I have enough tomorrow? Will I have enough tomorrow? But if there's 2 loaves of bread on the table, then I can go to bed tonight knowing that I have plenty tomorrow. So tonight, I can think about other things. It is the release, it is a liberation of the human being from the slavery of economics, you see? So, it begins with the manna in the desert. Eat it today, tomorrow's Shabbos. You'll not find it tomorrow. I'm not going to put it out tomorrow. 6 days you gather. On the 7th day, there's Shabbos, there won't be any. Look at verse 27. It starts with the word Vayehi, which is such a great word, because that's the way the creation begins, right? Vayehi erev, Vayehi boker, Yom HaShishi, right? Vayehi, which means, and it was, behold. It says yet here, but I think behold is a better word, right? Some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather it. They went to Costco. They went to Costco. Can you imagine that? 6 days they go to Costco. And God says to them, buy enough on the 6th day at Costco so you have enough on the 7th day. That's why Costco sells enormous quantities of things. You know, you get a boxcar of Rice Krispies, you know, so that tomorrow you don't have to go to Costco. You have 1 whole day of being a spiritual human being and not having to become economic. And not having to reduce yourself to consumer, or you become a spiritual human being 1 day. But on the 7th day, they went to Costco. Why? Maybe something's on sale. You know, they didn't trust. Why did they do that? And they found nothing, by the way. They were disappointed, just like Moses said they would, right? But that's not the problem. The problem is they went out. And when they go out, what does God say? This is interesting. And the Lord said to Moses, Ad matai, how long will you men refuse to obey my commandments and my teachings? There's that question again, right? The question of the human repertoire. What is it going to take to liberate this people? Right? What is it? Now here you might have a little rachmanis on the people, right? Because these are, after all, former slaves. They've been free now a week. Okay? They're not quite over the, you know, and God has this, and the question is interesting, by the way. The question doesn't say why, or did you. What does the question say? How long? That's an interesting question. First of all, if you're God, what do you care how long it takes? Well, it takes 10,000 years. So what? Okay, it takes 10,000 years. How long is not God's question, it's our question. How long will it take? And by the way, it doesn't say ad ana, yeah. And it doesn't say, how come you go out? It asks in a much broader question. Ma'antem lishmor mitzvotai v'toratai. Right? It's the whole system you reject. How long before you accept my vision of who you can be? That's that's the idealist question. That's really the idealist question. This becomes so the history of sin is this history of God sort of figuring human beings out. There's one more sin, which you've got to get to, because then we got to get to Numbers. And this is the mother of all sins. This is a really good one. 529. You in the mood for a good one? Moshe goes up to the top of the mountain to get the 10 commandments. Ironically, as he's getting the commandments, what are we doing at the bottom of the mountain, folks? When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down the mountain, it's Exodus 32. They gathered against Aaron and said, "Come, make us a god who'll go before us. For that man Moses who brought us to the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him." Aaron said, "Take off your gold rings." And they took them off, and he formed them into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, I'm on page 531, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." And when Aaron saw this, he built an altar and said, "Tomorrow's a festival to the Lord." Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and they rose to dance. Meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, right, which is pristine and quiet, where God is with Moses alone, meditating on the forms of morality, the Lord said to Moses, "Hurry down, for your people who you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely." And Moses' answer, you all remember, is, "What do you mean, you, Kimosabi? You know, I had a good life in Midian before you disturbed it, remember? They've turned aside quickly from the way that I enjoined them. They've made themselves a molten calf and bowed low to it and sacrificed to it, saying, 'This is your God, O Israel, brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" The Lord said to Moses, now what's missing? There's no question. Why is there no question? All of those things, those episodes in Genesis, every time there was a sin, there was a question, right? Even in Exodus, there was a question. How long will you go on disobeying? Here at the golden calf, there's no question.
Is it because the calf is supposed to be the replacing God?
Yeah, right.
The other places,
But why doesn't he ask a question the way he asks in all the other circumstances? Well, because it could be that Moses is not the sinner, right? But he doesn't even ask Moses, like, why would they do this? I mean, in some ways, this is a God who, on one hand, you could look at it and say, this is a God who's come to understand the people that he's dealing with, right? Right? This is a God, or maybe we have a sort of a switch in the nature of God. This is a God who gets frustrated much more quickly than before. Look what he does next, right? I'll be right with you, Ronnie. "I see this as a stiff-necked people." Look at verse 10. Hanichali. Hanichali, it says, "Let me be." Hanichali is it's a phrase that you use when you're asking permission. If you're a lawyer, before you stand in front of the judge, you say, "With the permission of the court," right? And you say, right? What do you say? Is that how you say it, Jerry? May it please the court, right? Okay. If you're a physician, physicians have ways of saying, may I do this, right? It's a may I. May it please the court, okay? God says to Moses, "Hanichali, allow me, please, okay? With your permission, birshut, right? With your permission, let me be, that my anger may blaze forth against them and I may destroy them and make of you a great nation." What's he going to do? Unlike Adam and unlike Cain and unlike the people who went out to get bread, this time God says, "I've had enough. I'm going to destroy them." Right? This is sort of the Noah response, right? I'm going to destroy them. But because he says hanichali, because he says with your permission, he asks. Moses takes that literally as if he has to give God permission. And Moses says, "I won't give you permission." And so you have this really interesting sort of dual this dialogue between the two. Hang on one second. Ronnie, get the first question. And then Pop.
God is using these questions as a teaching tool.
Yeah. I think you're right.
And because he knows the answers.
Mm-hmm.
So the teaching is just a matter of getting man to understand it.
I think it's a teaching tool, but I also think it's an exploration. It's part of this exploration of what is inside the human being. Pop, go ahead. What are you going to say?
God is asking Moses to put the brakes on.
Well,
The mere fact
go ahead.
that he says, "Give me permission," because if he were going to do it, he would do it and that's it. But asking Moses, "Give me permission," means he's asking Moses to say no.
Mm-hmm.
He wants Moses to put the brakes on.
Okay. So, this is like any good married couple. Right? Right? I'm going to brain that kid. No, you're not. This is any kind of, right? And there's a beautiful midrash that follows my pop's understanding. There's a midrash that on the day Moses dies, You okay there? On the day that Moses dies, God's weeping over Moses says, who's going to hold me back now? Who's going to hold me back now? All right, let's take one look now at Numbers. I'll give you a preview of coming attractions. Page 826. I'm sorry, 823. 823. This is next week's Torah portion. But now that we've talked about sin, you're going to get to see a little bit about what Numbers is all about. Everybody good? Okay, look at the last line on page 823. Numbers 10. In the second year, on the 20th day of the second month. Come on, guys, have some. So if you were to write that date out, what would it be? 2/20/02. Did you see that? Did everybody get that? Second day, second month, 20th day, second year. In other words, part 2. Part 1 was Egypt to Sinai, right? 2 years at Sinai, and now part 2. Now that we've been at Sinai, what's supposed to happen to us? You see, God, it was okay that when we first came out of Egypt, we complained about the food, and we complained about the water, and we complained about the desert, because, you know, we were new, we were slaves, but we went to Sinai. And what happened in Mount Sinai? We met God. And when you meet God, what's supposed to happen? You're transformed. Sorry, what? Mindset change. Paradigm shift. Transformation. You are born again. We are new people born again. Born again. We are free. We are now prepared to pursue the spiritual goals of God's vision for us, right? We are born again. That's Exodus. Exodus has this wonder. The book of Exodus is written by an idealist. All it takes is that one moment of revelation. The skies open up and the minds of the people open up. And we are transformed. God said, be my people. And we said, Naso v'nishma, we will be your people. It's beautiful, right? Oh, come on. And comes along the book of Numbers and says, watch, 2/20/02, part 2. Let's see what happens, right? And they start marching. They start marching. And here's the marching orders right here. Here's the marching orders, right? And turn to page 826. They marched. After 2 years, they marched from the mountain of the Lord, a distance of the half-life of transformation is 3 days. Okay? Anybody can be on a diet for 3 days. Anybody can be nice to their spouse for 3 days. Anybody can quit smoking for 3 days. It's that next day that's the hardest, right? 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant traveled in front of them 3 days, seeking out a resting place. And God's cloud. This is Numbers' way of quoting Exodus, because this is Exodus talk. This is miracle talk, right? And when the ark was set out, they would say, Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha. Advance, O Lord, may your enemies be scattered, and your foes flee before you. And when it halted, they would say, Shuv Adonai revavot alfei Yisrael. Return, O Lord, you are Israel's myriad of the thousands. And then, as soon as they camped, that's when the Torah started. Look at chapter 11. And I still think it's so beautiful that it's called chapter 11. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is the spiritual bankruptcy of the Jewish people. Chapter 11. Vayihi, vayihi, the word vayihi, and behold, vayihi, ha'am kimitnonanim rabba oznei Adonai. The people took to complaining bitterly before God. Now, wait a minute. You were slaves. They crushed you. They humiliated you. They oppressed you. They threw your babies into the Nile. They raped your women. They humiliated your elders. And they took you out of there, and you're kvetching about what? What do you have to kvetch about? And God got really angry, and God sort of lets it loose. But now the Bible goes, look at verse 4. This is so Bamidbar. The riffraff in their midst, right? Asuf suf, it's just asaf suf. This whole mishmash of people, right? Felt a gluttonous craving. And the Israelites wept and they said, "Oy vey, if only we had fleischiks. All we have is this manna. Pfft, miracle food. If only we had meat. Oy, we remember the fish we used to eat free in Egypt. Oh my God, in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melon, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Now our gullets are shriveled. Oh, I remember the midnight buffet." Anyone ever been on one of those cruise ships? With the chocolate fountain, you know? I remember the pastry tables, the Viennese table every night. Boy, what a cruise ship was Egypt. And it was all free. Oy. So here's poor Moses. Then the Bible says, and let me tell you what manna was like. Now this manna, nothing but this manna to look to. And the Bible says, yeah, but manna was like really good, right? Free food, right? And Moses heard the people weeping, every clan, every person at the entrance of his tent. And the Lord was angry, and Moses was distressed, except Moses got the first question in. Why have you dealt ill with your servant, and why haven't I enjoyed your favor, that you've laid the burden of this people upon me? Right? I mean, here's Moses, right? I give you justice. I give you truth. I bring you face to face with the Lord God. I give you what every human soul craves for. And what is it you guys want? Burgers, chops, steaks. Like, that's it? That's what you want? I offer you a social vision that is profound. And what do you guys want? You know? Tacos. You know, I was like, burritos. Like, what? There's such a dissymmetry. So what does Moses do? He loses it. He completely loses it. Unlike the golden calf story, where he maintains a sense of who this people is and what they're capable of, in this case, he completely loses it. So here's the question. What is the book of Bamidbar trying to tell us about this? Now, first of all, can you blame these people? If you step back for a moment, can you blame them? Can you blame them? And more than that, as we saw before, what the Bible is trying to do is explore the human repertoire of responses. What's the repertoire of responses here? What are you being told here about human beings? What mistake did God make? God made a terrible mistake. What mistake did he make? What did you? He what?
He made him human.
Yeah, no, that's true. But if you're dealing with human beings, what do you know? If you want to transform them, what do you have to do first? Yeah, well, they have free will. That's the problem. I mean, if they didn't have free will. By the way, at a certain point, he's going to get frustrated with free will. And in the prophet Jeremiah, he's going to say, well, maybe I'll just take the free will out of you. I'll make you righteous robots. It's a nice fantasy, righteous robots, right? I'll take that part out of it. So there's two problems here, and I want to just suggest what they are, and then we'll stop today, right? Number one, right? The number one is he's given them this ideal, but he hasn't really given them the assurance that they're secure in the world physically. Yeah, there's a certain sense in which I want to make sure my kids are fed before I get on to the questions of social transformation. And if you threaten my kids being fed before social transformation is introduced, I'm going to go back to my kids being fed. That's an issue, right? That's an issue. But there's a much bigger issue here, which is this. You can't drop transformation from on top of a mountain. They've had no role in any of this, right? Did they free themselves from Egypt? They didn't do a thing. They were spectators, right? God brings 10 terrifying plagues. God schleps them across the Red Sea. God brings them to Mount Sinai. God hands them the Torah at Mount Sinai. What have they done? What have they done? What have they done in any of this? Right. If you treat people that way, they're going to kvetch. At no point were they ever asked to have an active role in their own self-transformation. At no point were they ever engaged in their own liberation. This is what 500 summers in summer camp taught me. Neil's here because this was my partner in camp. Where's Neil? There he is, right? The first thing you do, you bring the kids and you say to the kids, build your tent. Right? Right? You don't give them the tent. You make them build the tent. You make them cook their own meals. It turns out even suburban kids, forced with the choice between starvation and cooking, will learn how to cook. Amazing. They had no role in their own self-transformation. The thing that God doesn't understand is that in order to transform this people, it has to also start from outside. It can't be dropped on them. And that's going to be a lesson he's going to learn, very difficult as it goes through. We're going to take a look at that next time. Okay? How do you transform a people? That's the great question of Bamidbar. How do you reconcile a social ideal with the nature of the human condition? You engage the human condition in the creation of the social ideal. That's going to be the theory of revolution of the Bible. It's going to be a really nice Shabbos, so take good care. We'll see you next week. Good luck parking. Okay? Stay well. Shabbat Shalom. Yeah. On Shabbos? Yeah.
What about during the week?
No.